Willie Fritz, University of Houston football coach. Great to have you with us. It's kind of the kickoff, I guess, to eventually the real kickoff. I was thinking today. We interviewed Sonny Dykes. We've interviewed I think 12 or 13 of the coaches along with you. And how coaches, when they think about, for example, Sonny Dykes is about to face Bill Belichick in North Carolina, and how he would prepare for that game. And he starts naming off all the coaches on his staff, Belichick's staff, and who they can watch film of. It's just unbelievable how integrated or the spider web of connections.
Oh, yeah, it really is. What was that actor, the 6 Degrees or somebody? I don't know.
Kevin Bacon. Yeah.
Kevin Bacon. And it's the same thing in coaching. You know, there's somebody that you're going to know. I've been doing this for so long that, I know someone on every staff. And a lot of my younger guys, they're really into networking, and they'll know all sorts of guys on staff. So, you can find out a lot of things because in that first ball game, too, you got to work on a lot of what ifs. They may change some things in spring ball, or they hired a new coordinator, or maybe you find out a guy went and visited another school. Maybe he's looking at something that other place is doing. There's some things we're going to do different that, may not be things that, our coordinators are known for, or I'm known for, that we worked on during, the spring and in the summer and those kind of different things. So, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of connectivity in football.
How did you do it before you could get film that easily?
Oh, we would drive to the
Yeah, I mean,
it was difficult. Yeah. But something, football has become so complicated. I was making the comment the other day when I took my first head coaching job at Blinn Junior College in 1993. On offense, you ran a 21 personnel. And every once in a while, you get into 22 personnel. You'd add another tight end, and then if you got crazy, you would, you'd get 11 personnel. You'd take, a back out, and you'd put another receiver in. That was about it. You did it to the field, and you never would do it to the boundary. And your defense was very, very simplistic. So you probably knew what you were going to get. Now the game has become so complicated. It really has, And I sit around and talk to high school coaches, and they're just as complicated as we are, and you're just just the communication process with getting the play to the players has become very complex as well. So, yeah, it's a lot different ball game. You got to work on a ton of what ifs the first couple of weeks, and then you also got to work on a few what ifs after a bye week. What could they maybe put in that would be simple for them to put in, but would be something hard for us to adjust to in a real game situation.
I wasn't thinking about this, but you just mentioned bye weeks. Do you like having the double bye weeks like we've had the last couple seasons?
Not last year, I didn't. Got my butt kicked both.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. But no, I think they're good for. The health of your team. I think it's good for recruiting. I think it's good to self-analyze yourself and see, what you're doing good, what you're doing bad. It helps me as a head coach to do that. But, I think it's good. We're stretching the season out. It seems like we just keep stretching it and stretching it and stretching it. And I guess maybe that's good. I remember Houston didn't report until the middle of August, and you were done in, the middle of November. And that's changed.
You always hear about the film don't lie when it comes to players watching film with coaches after a game. What about when coaches watch the film and, like you mentioned, analyze yourself and self-analyze how sometimes difficult could those film sessions be?
You got to be mature. You hope all your coaches are mature enough to recognize a mistake that they've made or what they need to change or something that's not working. I've said it a couple times today. Sometimes the guys can't see the forest for the trees. This guy cannot run the outside zone, but we're going to continue to keep running him on the outside zone, right? And sometimes I have to step in and say, hey, if I see that again, I'm going to pull my freaking hair out on the sideline. We can't do that. Or it might just be a gentle nudge. Hey, what do you think about it? I like sometimes letting our guys think they figured it out. Yeah, I think I'm not going to run him on that. That's probably a pretty good idea. But that's what you got to look at in all three phases in order to get better and improve. And one of the things I talk about about all the time is, as a coach, as a head coach, as a player, you can't be sensitive. People are so they don't like to criticize people. And sometimes you got to have constructive criticism, and you got to do it all the time. You got to learn from it and then move on.
You are bringing in Conner Weigman at quarterback, who, I think if people watch the games that he played fully when the system was built around his skill set, they'll see a different quarterback than one that was trying to learn a new offense last year that maybe didn't completely match up with him, which is why Marcel Reed just fit better in Colin Klein's system. What are you getting with Conner Weigman when he is in a system that suits what he can do?
Well, I was very impressed with him this spring. He was banged up, like you said. I think some people didn't really realize that, but he probably didn't get fully healthy until February, something like that. And he's able to go through all spring ball, and we had to kind of limit his throws the first week or two, but he's 100% ready to go right now. And, he's a dual threat guy. You got to pick your spots where you're going to run a quarterback, in my opinion. I don't, when I was at Georgia Southern, we'd run those guys, 25, 30 times a game, but we're not going to do that nowadays because we also want to be successful throwing the football. But he, you're right. It's, one of the reasons why I really try to gather information on everybody that we add to our program. And I talked to Colin Klein, and he said nothing but positive things about him. And one of the things you mentioned, he said, maybe he doesn't quite fit how I do things. And Colin's had a ton of success. I talked to Jimbo Fisher. He couldn't say anything but great things about him. Talked to his high school coaches, and everything just came together that, something I talk about with the relationships. His dad, I coached his dad in 1991 at Sam Houston State. And I tell guys, you never know about how you treat somebody, right? I'd have been a turd all them years ago. He probably said, you're not going to play for that guy.
Yeah.
So it's just we're excited about having him, and I know he's really excited about this fresh start at the University of Houston.
Who's your favorite person, past or present, to talk ball with?
Oh, the guy I talk to all the time is Ron Randleman. Ron was my college coach at Pittsburgh State University, the Gorillas. Yeah. That's right. And he, came down to Huntsville to Sam Houston State, and that's how I made it down to Texas. And he comes to all my games. He's like my dad. Came to all my home games at Tulane. He was happy I took this job because it's an easier commute from Huntsville to Houston than Huntsville to New Orleans. So he's the guy that I talk to about hiring and, anything regarding football.
There's obviously a different age in college athletics. Initially, there was the NIL, and we didn't, it was kind of, okay, that's pretty cool. And then the transfer portal. It just seems like everything is wide open, and they're trying to maybe contain it. There's the house settlement. How much do you spend, or is there someone that's kind of like assigned to make sure you're up to date with all what's going on?
I've got two people that I really work with. Almost everybody on my staff, Sean would be an exception. Either played for me someplace else, coached for me someplace else, or both.
Yeah.
All right. So I got my football operations guy, played for me in Central Missouri many years ago. He's been in with me a lot of places. He's one guy I lean on a lot that I talk to a bunch. Don Landholm is another guy that works the player personnel. Don and I coached together at Blinn, and he was with me at Tulane and now obviously at University of Houston. And then my son is our general manager. So he's coached and played for me every place, I guess. But so I kind of lean on those guys when we're making decisions about all that stuff, and because I look at it a little differently than they do. I remember when I was shoveling snow and mowing grass for $2 an hour. I think about it, things maybe different than they do. So it's good for me to hear a different perspective on how we should do things.
Are you still available at $2 an hour? I think my guys are.
No, I'm not.
Okay. I'm just.
I am not.
Did you have that old edger that was just the metal?
I had all that stuff.
Oh, Lord.
Someone one of these deals, they asked me what was my first job, and when I lived in Buffalo, New York, I would snow, and I worked for a guy, and he'd drive us around, and we'd walk up to the doors and ring the doorbell, and need your driveway shoveled, and I don't know what he was getting, but I wasn't getting much. And then we did the same thing in the summer for
he was an
cutting
agent.
yard. Yeah, he was an agent.
He was an agent. Yeah.
I think getting the family, just talking to all the coaches, you guys want the rules to make sense. Like, you want them to be fair, but you also just want to know what they are. I mean, your coaches, if they all of a sudden told you guys you're all going to coach a basketball game against each other, you'd be like, all right, well, are we doing half court, twos, threes, ones? Like, we playing at 21, we're going to go coach it. That's what you're going to do. That's all you want to know, and you'd like to have maybe a little input on how it gets done, and you don't get a lot of that. Is it frustrating to just all of a sudden be kind of handed like, here's the new thing, and you're like, well, this doesn't anything?
You hit it on the head about having some input. Example with the NCAA, years ago, I was on the rules committee when I was at Georgia Southern, and it was me and one other coach. Everybody else was athletic directors. I had to explain to him what an RPO was. I got up on the board and I drew it up, and because we were talking about linemen downfield and things like that, I just was like, what are we doing? Why do we have, it'd be like me, making athletic administrative decisions. I don't know what the heck I'm doing with 30 sports or whatever the case may be. So we need to get more input, and we need to, there's a few things I'd like to see us do. Certification of agents. You touched on it just a moment ago. Some of our guys are paying 20% out of what they're getting. That's ridiculous. And anybody can be an agent. Anybody can call me and represent somebody. That's stupidity in my, make them have a guy that really knows what's going on. And because I like visiting with those kind of people. That's good. And, then we need to see, what we're going to do with the tampering part of it. I think so many people recruit guys before they've gotten in the portal. None of us. Nobody ever raised their hand and says that's me. But we got to do something about it and get that figured out.
That was Chris Kleiman yesterday talking about no one's on like the advisory camp. I think
the D1 council.
Yeah,
he said there's no coaches on the D1 council, and I went, how does that how do you not even just give one an emeritus position to just when you get to the point and go, hey, coach, you've done this for 40 years. What do you think about that?
I just I see Lance Leipold walking down the steps there. He's coached at a bunch of different levels too, but get some input. We got some smart. Hey, in my opinion, Chris is a bigwig on the American Football Coaches Association, and I think Craig Bowl is, he needs to be the guy. It's like Brett Yormark. Someone was asking me my opinion on the playoffs. He spends all day, every day, thinking about this crap. Right? I don't. So we need to lean on him. Same thing with what we're doing in football. Let's lean on Craig Bowl, the American Football Coaches Association, because they're in it for the student athletes, but more importantly, the sport.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see us do that.
Thank you very much, man. It's always great to have you.
Thank you. I'll tell the Bills that I ran into you guys again.
Tell them we said hi. Willie Fritz, head football coach at the University of Houston in Frisco on 365 Sports.